If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Disconnected. I am here with Todd Strauss-Schulson, somebody that I know primarily for my love of the film The Final Girls. We're going to be talking about this, some of the other works that he has been involved in, and then a shared passion for physical media and perhaps the future in that. Todd, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
The big thing I want to say is thank you to my friend Jeremy that set this up between us. He is a wonderful human being, and I've adored and been preaching the love for Final Girls since it came out. This is that year that it came out. It was one of my favorite horrors that came out, and I feel like it was just such a unique idea for a movie and came out just wonderfully. I'm so glad that you had a big part in that.
Yeah, I directed it. I had a big part in it. It is wild to me that movie, I still get to talk about that movie all these years later. It was a small movie. It was a labor of love. All of us that made it still are friends. It was we burned real bright while we were making that movie. And it came out, and it was a bummer the way that it was released. And it broke all our hearts, and it was a couple years too early. Just if it was on Netflix, it would have been a different kind of story. But it became what it's about, which is a cult movie. And I met him 2 weeks ago at like a Halloween screening in Los Angeles, and that it was amazing that screening even existed, and it was filled with fans. It's just crazy. So I feel lucky. It's lucky that it became that.
Well, one of the biggest parts of it is to me, it's one of the best modern examples of balancing horror and comedy, and not just in the stereotypical, we're going to say that horror and comedy is, difficult to balance properly. It's actually balanced properly. There's fun jump scares. There's actual good comedy. It's not something that you fight to say, hey, if you like comedy, you might like this. It's not really your thing, maybe. It's like that perfect melding of genres. I really love how it came together like that.
Thank you. I don't know how we did that. It wasn't that hard. It seemed pretty easy. It was hard to get the money. It was hard to get it off the ground. It was hard to shoot it with no money and no time. But that tone came pretty naturally.
Yeah.
And I was, and Josh Miller, who wrote it, we were all very passionate about telling a personal story about loss and grief. I tell the story all the time, but I had lost my father, a year or two right before I made this movie. Josh had lost his father, who was famous actor who played Father Karras in The Exorcist. And Josh's only way to experience his dad after his death was to watch The Exorcist and watch his dad get murdered over and over. That was the way that he could see his dad and say, hey, in this gruesome, grisly, sort of twisted way. And I had lost my father before my first movie, which was a Harold and Kumar Christmas, which is a ridiculous movie to have made first. And when I was editing that movie, Josh and Mark, who were friends and a couple and partners, writing partners, sent me a draft of the script. And I thought, I know exactly what to do about this, because it felt like it was my experience. It was a movie about having a second chance or one more chance to see a parent that you love, to maybe save them, to have one last day, and to protect them, to save them from, death. And then the meta part of it that was so fun, and Pleasantville and Back to the Future and Purple Rose of Cairo, we just felt like such a fun game to play. But I think we were all very focused on the last 25 minutes, that was the movie. We went around pitching it like Friday the 13th meets Terms of Endearment, which was like the worst fucking pitch. But that is how we were thinking about it initially. It was
Right.
less like we're going to do a horror comedy parody meta take. It wasn't. That was all too cerebral. We were coming at it with our hearts, and the rest of it sort of fell into place somehow.
I've never told my wife this, and anybody, please don't share this with her. But one of the things since I saw this movie, and I've been doing this sort of thing with YouTube and podcasting and all that other stuff, is this movie kind of led me to think about the way that I interact with this for my kids differently. Because one of the things that I'm gonna have, a possible legacy for them is if I drop dead tomorrow because I'm a fat ass, they can go back and say, man, I can watch him be passionate about films for 500 hours if I want, because that's what he talks about all the time.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So
Final Girls in Spot made you think about that?
yeah, that's one of the original things that I've watched this movie probably 8 or 10 times, and watching through after I started all this, it was, man, there is this actual creative side that my kids will get to be able to touch because it's YouTube. I mean, it's possible that it could all be deleted, I guess, but in some forms, this will be there in perpetuity. I mean, I've got all the videos, and my kids can watch that if I were to drop dead tomorrow.
That was really beautiful. I hope you don't.
Me too. You're not the only one.
How big are you underneath this screen? Are you that big?
Well, I'm not. I carry it well, but I'm 6'5". I'm a giant human being.
Yeah,
so
you're a giant human being. You're part of a buffalo. Yeah.
yes, I basically am a buffalo. One of the things that I've always thought about with directing films like this, you've got comedy, you've got horror, and we've talked to death about the way that the genres are pretty similar. Now, when you're doing something like this that has an emotional core, and you're dealing with somebody like Adam Devine and Thomas Middleditch and people that are known for improving just hilariously. How do you wrangle some of that in? Was it a fight making this to get some of that improv to calm down?
No, not trying to get it to calm down. It was like, I tried to see the tone in the casting. That was always, everyone was always, we were trying to get the money. What's the tone? What's the tone? Because just reading it on the page, it did feel like 3 movies. It felt like it was his mother-daughter thing. It felt like it was like a horror movie. And then it had this sort of meta comedy quality, and no one could quite tell what the tone was. And I didn't quite know how to describe it either because it just seemed so natural to me. The tone was like my personality, I guess,
Yeah.
sort of self-aware, but pretty, emotional and sensitive person and funny. And so the casting was the tone, as in it was going to have some people who you are very funny that and they can do that. It was going to have a pretty grounded anchor in Thaisa, whose performance is not a comedy performance. It's almost a dramatic performance. I watch the movie now when it's screened, and I'm like, Jesus, she's so cellophane thin. She's so fragile. She's almost whispering her dialogue, like you can feel this. And Malin, who was able to kind of do a combination of funny, but in real life, she had just become a mother, and so I think that feeling of love and of brightness and of just caring so much about some other things so suddenly, that was, I think, very close to the surface. And then there was like Nina and Alexander, who were sort of, they'd come out of like CW, sort of almost like soaps, like kind of a melodrama, like a modern melodrama. It's like, yeah, there's that too. There is a melodrama to the movie in a nice way. And we thought it would be that. And then the comedy stuff, I'd come from a comedy background. I'd made Harold and Kumar. A lot of the short films I'd made are all comedy things, and I was around comedians all the time. And comedy troupes in college and all that. And so I knew how to do that. And the script, one of the things that Mark and Josh wrote the script, but I got involved early, and then we did like a year and a half of just like fucking with the script as we were trying to find money. One of the things that I tried to bring to it was a lot of the meta stuff, the fun game of that, how the movie would be an antagonist. Like that was a clever thing to do, I thought. Clever. And the comedy. And I had a bunch of friends. There were alt jokes. We had pages of alts for every line. And so there was that going on. The script got punched up by a million hilarious people that were just doing me a favor. And so the script got funnier, and it was punchier, and there were these sheets of extra jokes. Then Adam and Thomas were just friends, and Alia too. And to see them you just knew. You're like,
yeah.
you were like, okay, so this is a scene where you're the biggest fan of this movie and you don't know that you're in a movie, and just start talking. And that just felt like a very fun, almost improv game for them. Always you run into trouble when you have one person who's great at improv and one person who's not, but they're trying to keep up.
Yeah.
That's trouble, because the person who's, for no fault of their own, it's a very specific and hard thing to be that nimble and hilarious. But sometimes you get into a situation where the person who's not quite as strong at it tries to keep up and it starts to interrupt and tries to talk over, and then you kind of are just like, you can't really say it, but what you want to say is, just don't try, let them just do it. But with Thomas and Alia and Adam, they're all so great. You don't have to say that. You just get to sort of sit back and watch the movie unfold. And maybe they'll stumble into something and you're like, yeah. The Michael Jackson thing, do that. Do that a couple more times and react to it like this and react to it like that. And then you try to, it's very exciting to watch them do it. It's like they're performing the movie just for you. And then you get to actually kind of mold it as they go.
Of course.
That was great.
The individual characters in this are just so unique, and it really highlights something that I feel about this that I think a lot of movies just don't have the ability to capture, and that's I've used this term before, but I kind of describe this as a bit of a chameleon film, because there's some movies that you really have to be in that perfect mood to grasp the extent of the emotions or something like that. Some of these you could catch on the wrong night and it just doesn't work for you. With this, because it has the different tones, the different types of stories, there's kind of somebody in here for every single person to relate to, it feels like. Do you feel like there's anybody that's been left out when they're responding to this? Is there any like group that hasn't responded well to this that you're questioning how?
I would say that a lot of people don't know this movie exists, but if you've seen it, you love it. And that is that just feels cool in a way. That's kind of like the movie that you'd like to have one of those in your career.
Exactly.
You know, like maybe it wasn't successful, but it was influential, and people really love it, and they love to. It's like a badge of honor, you know, if you know this. And when I was a kid, even still, I'll see something, I'm like, no one's ever heard of this, and now I'm the only one that is privy to this like secret, beautiful jewel, and I get to share it with people, and you feel so excited that you get to tell. And I get the sense that maybe somehow this became a version of that, but I don't know why that is. I think the movie is warm and funny, and we did have fun doing it. And I think that you can maybe feel the energy that we had in the making of it maybe is somehow infused into the movie. So it is a little euphoric and giddy, and it's dense. When I watch it now, I'm like watching a different version of me as a filmmaker do it. And I'm like, damn, this movie is full of ideas and it's dense, and it moves fast, it moves like a rocket, and it's true. It never gets too static. You're always getting propelled forward, and it's either a joke, or you're surprised by the heart, or it's some stylish visual thing, or it's a scare. I was worried, we all were worried that horror fans would reject it because it's PG-13,
right?
And it's a little soft. It's a little soft in its horror. It's not gruesome. It's not, really a slasher, because it is, and we were so surprised when it came out that it was the horror community that loved it, that were the early adopters, and that were the most vocal fans. I'm forever indebted, and I'm part of that world, just as like a person who loves horror movies and grew up watching them and wanting to make them. But we were nervous that we didn't have a choice. We had to do it at this rating or not do it at all. And so we made that compromise and tried to be clever about how we did it. But it was amazing that the horror community, they didn't need the blood and gore. They just wanted some scares and a love letter and an homage, and I hear so often, I get emails and DMs and all this of like, I lost a parent and it means the world to me, from people that like are covered in tattoos and have septum things and are just look like, that they're the horror community.
Yep.
But, horror movies are not for sociopaths. They're for sensitive, smart people.
The horror community itself is a community first, and I feel like this is a community movie. There's so much that just watching this, I don't know if this is too like sappy to say, it can feel like a support group type of film, because you get this emotional resonance when all of us have faced tragedies, and this is, if you could go back, this is you reliving some of those things that you would just dream of doing, and it's an incredible feeling.
I think that I mean, just to talk about horror movies, like, yeah, I mean, I think I think there's probably something true about that. Certainly, I hear that enough that I'm like, I guess so, and that's great. But like all of the most perennial horror movies, the Fridays and the Nightmares and the Burning and all that stuff, they they're like gross and all this, but they're sort of good natured. They're sort of innocent.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like the perennial ones they cost nothing and they look like shit. And you go to the conventions and you meet everybody, and
Yep.
there's something good natured. They're not like It's not like watching Funny Games, or like a movie that is, or like what was it? What's that Lars von Trier movie with Matt Dillon, like Jack the Builder or something?
The house
Like
that Jack built.
The House of Jack built. Like those movies are for crazy people. Like those are not good natured movies. And there's obviously a place for those, but yeah, the horror community, I think we love these fucking movies because they smile very clearly about intergenerational grief,
Yeah.
and you're like, yeah, it's just like sci-fi. You're able to sort of do subterfuge of human stories of loss and all that, and grief, and just primordial feelings, and you can work them out with the group. So I think support group is like the perfect way to contextualize what this world is, and I love being part of it.
I don't want to hit this movie like into the ground by asking so many questions over it, so I think I'll go with one more thing on it, and that's to bring it up in context of modern horror, because I feel like a lot has changed since the cusp of perhaps streaming is the reason for it. But we're getting a lot of films that are about trauma, and not that this isn't, because it obviously is, but a lot of the more modern, like straight to streaming horrors will straight tell you this is because your mother died and we need to dive it, something like that. And something about Final Girls is it is so obviously like that's the front of the story, but it somehow doesn't feel like it's hitting you over the head with that messaging. Do you feel like you had a big part to play in that nuance, or does it feel that way to you? Do you feel like it's different from modern horror in any way in that trauma sense?
I don't, all I know is that and I know that Josh too, were the movie that we thought we were making. I knew it was like, yeah, the action, the jokes, and the meta, and that's all so fun, but it wasn't primary. It really was that our big hearts were right there on our sleeves, and my father was right there over my shoulders really soon after, and it was a movie about that, and full of love, and that scene at the end, which is the whole movie is building towards. I mean, like, everything is a strategy, as in, the movie is funny so that it's disarming, so it disarms you, so that
Yeah.
in the end, when they say goodbye and she goes, I'm a movie star, you are not expecting to cry, but you're gonna, because you've been charmed by the movie, you've been tenderized by
Yeah.
it. And James L. Brooks movies do that. A lot of movies that I love, Cameron Crowe movies, Jeremy, they do that. They incorporate humor as a storytelling strategy to get you engaged, attuned, in love with those people, and not like combative with the movie. Like, you just kind of are surrender to the movie, and then at the end we can get you there. And the horror and the pace and all those things are strategies to make that last scene work. And when we shot that last scene, the goodbye scene, I can just tell you that I was sitting in that church in Baton Rouge in the middle of the night. I had eaten 5 hamburgers, and it was me saying goodbye to my dad. That's what it was. And through their mouths, and I was watching the monitors, and I was crying, and I felt him right there behind me. And that is a real feeling that was in the room, and those actors felt it coming off of me. When the crew would ask me questions, they would speak quietly because they could see that I was going through something. And I think it was contagious. It was purposefully. I let people see that part of me because I wanted it to be infused into everybody. And so I think that for all of us, it was all building to that. And so it wasn't so intellectual about this is trauma and this is the psychoanalytic reason why, but it was really just a big heart. This is a big heart in when we were writing it and when we were making it. And that, I think, maybe is the feeling that's in there.
That last act is very, very vulnerable, and clearly that vulnerability was coming from somebody who was feeling vulnerable. So
And
it
Thaisa's
comes across.
Yeah, and Thaisa's performance does it. And Malin, again, she's talking to her daughter, and she just had one. So I think there was some lucky break cosmically that, like, I was obviously living it, but so were they.
Yeah.
And so whatever that um, confluence of events, or that like clot of luck, maybe that's what you're feeling. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's got to help having an incredible cast like that, and being a fanboy that I am of one individual in particular, and not to make you fanboy yourself on somebody else. What is it like to work with Bo Burnham, who, in my opinion, is like the most modern Renaissance man that we possibly have? And I say this knowing full well that I've been watching him. I think I found his very first YouTube video within about a month of him posting it, and I've followed him every single step of the way. And even with Zach Stone not being this huge piece that it was, I really think that this is going to be looked back on in a decade as, how have you not seen this? Because this is a brilliant show.
Kind of is. I don't think that I realized it at the time either. Like, Inside, I thought was like the most incredible, probably the best piece of COVID art that got made
Yeah.
during that year and a half. I loved it. I loved it. He's obviously some sort of a genius.
Yes.
But I think at the time when I did that show, I didn't know. I didn't know that he was a genius. He was so young,
Yeah.
sort of green, and it was his first real thing after just doing videos. But
Outside of his attic, literally.
yeah, and he was really young. I was older than him, but I was young too. It was one of my first jobs. And what do I remember from it? I remember he knew what he wanted, but it was a challenge for me, actually, because that the conceit of that show was that it was like a faux documentary, but
Yeah.
that I couldn't do any of the things that I love to do, which is like this stylish cinematic language.
Right.
I mean, Final Girls that's what I like to do, and I felt like quite restrained, but they wanted me to try to figure out how to bring some of that stuff into this format, and so I was just like, I don't really know what to do. But he was great, and he's a genius, and I also can't believe that I got a chance to. And for a couple of weeks, we were together doing that in Los Angeles. Yeah, it was just a really exciting, cool thing. But I hadn't even made Final Girls. I don't think that he knew. He didn't know me, and I didn't really know him. So
Right.
we just kind of did it. Sort of did our
That's
job.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really hope that eventually finds some sort of audience, because, man, every single thing he touches, it seems like, is just waiting to find an audience, and the moment it does, it explodes.
You could tell that he knew exactly what he wanted to do there, and I think that because he was so young, he was leaning on a lot of other people to help him bring it to life. And then I think you find that he's like, I'm just going to bring it to life myself because now I know how to do this. And he's the best person to bring that stuff to life because it's his, and it's incredible. I mean, like, 8th Grade is like the greatest. It's a first movie. It's unbelievable. So yeah, he's just genius.
Eighth grade blew my mind when it first came out, and primarily because I don't know. I mean, you and I are fairly close in age, but something about it, like I was on the cusp of being the age that was witnessing the rise of social media right after I came out of school, and it was still a part of everybody's life. But then not being in touch with that, but being just older, it felt like this alienation watching this movie.
I remember just being like that. The I remember there being vividly like a scene or like she's like watching people talking at a table. And she's like trying to find the moment that she could
Yep.
get into the conversation, but there just isn't one. And you're trying to herky jerky. Can I is now the time? And as an adult man, I feel like that constantly. And I think that putting it in the body of a little kid, a little girl, but any little kid. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think he was making a kids movie. Obviously, I think he was trying to make like the first, like an adolescent movie, like the first time that you feel all the feelings that you still carry into adulthood. And I found it very relatable and clever in that way, and really sweet and emotional, even though it's a bit
Yeah.
sarcastic and ironic.
Yeah, a little bit cringe on purpose.
Yeah.
I imagine you felt that moment quite a few times, and maybe some pressure when your first film is part of a franchise, and you're stepping in,
Nice
kind of
transition. Look at you, segue.
doing my best. Is there pressure with that? You know, when you come in, you've got Neil Patrick Harris and these other big names that have been building their chemistry. Now you got to come in and make your chemistry with these people. How does that feel, being that your first movie?
Um, I'd wanted to make movies my whole life from when I was like single digits, and all I did from when I was 13 until I was in college was make a movie every day after school. So this is just to say that this was a dream come true to get to make a movie. And prior to that movie, I'd only made short films, nothing more than 10 minutes long.
Wow.
So this was really something. But I was also like a lunatic. I was like Wile E. Coyote. I was like, wouldn't stop. I made movies every day. One year I made like 250 little short things,
Wow.
I mean, and I was editing them and shooting them. I was a nut. And by the time I got to that movie, I did feel pretty confident. I felt really confident because I felt that I had just put in the hours, and I had felt confident in my ideas and my technique, and that I could do jokes, and I was ready. I just felt really ready. Doing a movie that has a number 3 at the end of it for your first movie was probably not my dream as a child. But I also did feel like, I don't know, man, like, what did James Cameron make first? Like Piranha?
Yeah, Piranha 2.
Yeah, I was like, well, okay, I guess you could do it. Like Jonathan Demme made Target, sounds like you could. Okay, it's a way to do it. And it was a really big budget, and it was in 3D, and I loved those movies. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was in high school, I was like stoned watching the
Who
first one.
doesn't? Yeah.
I loved that movie, and I thought that it would be a great showcase for me also because it was episodic kind of in nature, like you could do multiple genres inside of one movie. You'd have the
Yep.
chase scene and the heist scene and the musical number, and you could do all this. And it was a warm story about friendship. And the Christmas part also, I was like, God, there's just so much cinematic stuff that I could play around with. This is so, and
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I can't say no. I want to do it. I also remember thinking that doing the third in a franchise, I felt this competitive thing in me, like almost like
Mm.
sports, where I was like, I'm going to show them how to make a Harold and Kumar movie. Because I remember the first one was great and the second one was just okay. And I felt like I'm going to I'm going to show them how to make these like us. I remember thinking this is going to be a spectacle. I'm going to go full spectacle with this, like a William Castle movie, 3D and all. I was watching all those William Castle movies, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to just like full out every trick, all that. And so I kind of came into it with that spirit. But I had 1,000 blind spots. I also was like 2 months out of losing a parent, so my nervous system was shot, and I didn't realize it. And I was 28 or 29, something like that. So pretty young to do that. I was the youngest person on set by far, including the actors. So that was, and the crew was like 150. It was a big movie. It's like 150 people. We were in Detroit. I was far from home. The whole thing was overwhelming. And I'd never done anything like that before, but I was confident. But I had all these blind spots. We had a DP who was not nice to me. He was not collaborative. It was just really, really challenging. And the 3D of it made it so that we were stuck with him. So that was a daily challenge to navigate. I'd never been in a creative situation where people didn't want to just be supportive and
Right.
collaborative or weren't my friends. And suddenly I had a kind of a arrogant person. I was like, I don't know what to do with this. And I'd also never been in a situation where like things were cumbersome, like if you had to block a scene, I had never blocked a scene. I didn't know how to do that. And the actors would say, we kind of want to go here and here and there and there. And I'd go like, looks good to me. And then I'd look at the DP and he'd be like, well, that's going to be like 35 setups and that's going to take us all day. You've got to get them to sit in a chair and have this conversation. And I said, oh, okay. Can you guys sit in the chair and do it instead? And then they'd say, no. And I wouldn't know what to do. And so there were just a lot of blind spots like that. There was a hazing. It was kind of a hazing process in a
Yeah.
way. And, but it was ultimately a great experience. That movie is nuts and also filled with energy. And it was made me really prepared to do Final Girls. I mean, I did sort of want to make my first movie second is what it felt like. It almost felt like they came out of sequence in a way. But I learned so much. Editing that movie was wonderful. There were a lot of amazing people that I got to work with. All those actors were great. John and Hayden, who wrote it, were incredibly supportive, and they just passed that torch over to me, and they were just incredibly instructive and supportive and great. And the studio was great too. They gave me my third movie. So it was a hazing and there were blind spots, but it was ultimately an insane first thing to make at quite a high level. Yeah.
It also, I mean, it probably served you well going from the high energy of 250 shorts a year to the high energy, very frenetic type of filmmaking that comes with a quick studio film with some of the most frenetic actors and a franchise out there.
Yeah, like I feel like that I was like thriving when it was like that heist scene or the music.
Yeah.
I was like, yep, or the car crash. I was like, can't wait to do this. But I also was just like, the stamina it takes to shoot for 45 days, I didn't know. There's just like some bread and butter things. You're like, I don't know. That's like a lot of, my brain has got to be that focused for that many days in a
Right.
row without a break. I just never done it before. So you kind of got to know how to pace yourself. And I've gotten obviously better at it. But at the time, I think I was just going full on adrenaline. And that's not a bad thing either.
I think that quite a few people that will watch this are individuals that have likely shared similar dreams. They've wanted to be creative. They've wanted to make something, and you've done it so many times. And even just with the shorts, a lot of people don't find that drive. So when you're making 250 a year, how do you stay motivated? How do you feel like you're even shooting for that next level when perhaps 250 is a lot to keep up? We'll say.
Well, I don't feel that way anymore. But at the time, I just had this dream. I don't know. I probably was on the run from being insecure. Like
Mm.
I had to constantly prove to myself that I was good. Otherwise, I would forget that I was. And that was probably a driver. And sometimes I just wouldn't make something for a second and I would feel awful about myself. And I'd make myself make something and then I'd watch it and be like, nah, I'm pretty good. And and but I also like had this goal of doing this. And so I don't know. There it I would say many other parts of my life were underdeveloped, but put all my energy into this. Um and that year with the 250, that was just nuts. I don't know how that happened. That wasn't just like making 250 personal shorts. I made a couple, but that was like jobs,
Right.
like college humor was a thing and branded content for candy bars. And I need 10 of these and we're going to do 30 of those. And while you're at it, do 2 of these. And I just kind of got this momentum going, but I got it in my muscle memory. And then I was also making my own stuff, but it was a lot of those one-off, do 30 seconds, 2-minute thing, man on the
Right.
street. It was like that stuff. But at the end of the year, I counted it up and I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. How can I do this with my eyes closed? That was
Right.
at the point where I was like shooting stuff in order so that when I would put it into Premiere, I wouldn't have to like organize anything. Like my brain turned into the edit. I was like, okay, this is like, now I can just do this so easily. I don't know if I could do it like that anymore, but certainly in the lead up to that first movie, that's how I felt.
I think one of the best things that anybody that's trying to do anything creative can really start to grasp is that different people are motivated different ways. And for individuals that either were feeling insecure based on certain things, or maybe the opposite end of the spectrum, some people need that motivation of somebody else coming in and saying, no, you need a little more work. And I'm glad that you were able to hold yourself to that with those 250 items. How was the feedback in that time? Do you feel like in that year you gained enough momentum that's truly what got you to where you were?
I think well, just to talk about what you just said, I think that one thing that happened, my dad was like the Royal Tannenbaums. Like every day after school, when I was in high school, I'd make something. I'd
Wow.
like in-camera edit some little dumb movie. They were usually chase scenes or some Sam Raimi-esque something or other. And when my parents came home from work, I'd show them my movie. And they did not always say, "Isn't that great, honey? Wow." They'd be like, "This one didn't make any sense. Yesterday's was better." Or "This was boring." Or like, "I don't get it. What is happening?" So, that was helpful, but also it was brutal.
Yeah.
But it kind of just kept you hungry in some sort of a way. It was a mixed bag. And then for my own reasons, I had this crazy engine in me. But I never had a mentor, and I went to a high school with no arts programs, and in college, I sort of did it alone. I got involved with comedy troupes that suddenly were like actors and writers, and I got to make their stuff, and that was exciting. But kind of the thing that was leading up to the movie was I remember it really vividly because for like 9 or 10 years I was broke and losing faith. And I remember on New Year's Eve I'd be like, how much longer can I actually do this? Like, this is awful. How much longer can I put myself through this? This is
Right.
terrible. And I'm like, one more year, I guess. But I, I'd gotten weird odd jobs and all this stuff, and I was making things a lot, but not the kind of things I wanted. And I remember there was a moment where I think maybe someone told me this, but like, you can't control what anyone else likes. You can only control how good you are. And it made me, that was very helpful because it made me feel a sense that I could control something because I felt like I had no control over anything. I was writing music video treatments, or I was just trying to get anyone to hire me or sign me or get a
Mhm.
manager, and I had no control over it. And someone was like, forget about the outside. Just focus on getting so good that you're undeniable. I found that to be incredibly helpful advice. And then I just started to watch 1,000 movies. I always watched the features and all that, but I started to like really dive into movies I'd never heard of or never seen. I'd pick a director and go through the whole thing in order. And I started to make a ton of short films alone and try to give myself filmmaking challenges. Maybe can I
Wow.
take a subject that sounds disgusting and make it romantic? Create can I create mood? How can I do mood? I was watching all these Cronenberg movies. I was like, God, the atmosphere is so, what is this feeling? Like, can I
Yeah.
create a feeling like that? Challenges, things I hadn't done that I want. And so, at the same time, I was doing these dumb jobs. And I remember there was a point where I got good. I was doing all these jobs. I could edit and shoot and do it fast and do it cheap. But I hated what I was actually making. And I remember I had all this anger in me. With that anger, I was like, fuck you. I'm stealing the camera. I'm stealing the tracks. I'm breaking into the office and I'm going to shoot something this weekend for myself with my friends. And I'm gonna fucking, and like, the feeling was like, fuck you. I'm gonna show you what I've got. Because I hate that I'm being diverted into this stuff
Wow.
instead. And we shot this dumb little short and I cut it together all the same way. and we put it on the internet, and it went super viral. And that one was the one that suddenly I had agents and representation, and it was my way in. And then I kept on doing those shorts, and I kept on doing that for a year and a half. And those are the shorts that New Line saw and were like into, and that got them to give me Harold and Kumar.
Damn.
And all those shorts are on my website,
which will be linked in the description below, of course. I mean, with that, when you're holding yourself to this insanely like almost like anal bar of I have to be incredible. What was your bar? What were you aiming for? What were those films that you went, damn, if I can only be as good as this?
I mean, I can tell you the movies I had my whole personality was movies, and my ceiling in high school was covered wallpapered with movie posters. And those movies were Magnolia and Boogie Nights and Armageddon and Fargo, and I mean these filmmakers, and I had an Army of Darkness poster, and I had a Die Hard with a Vengeance poster because I love John McTiernan movies, and I love Jonathan Demme movies, and what else was up there? I loved Michael Bay movies. I loved that The Game was on my ceiling. I thought that was the greatest. So I was very compelled by filmmakers that had a very specific visual style. Basquiat was on my ceiling.
Wow.
In Chernobyl. I think any filmmaker, I was like, whoa, what are those images, or what are those camera moves, or what is this feeling, and what is music choices? Holy shit. And Die Hard with a Vengeance is like the best New York movie ever made. I loved Woody Allen movies. R.I.P. When I was a kid, though, I loved them. And so those any filmmaker that had a really specific visual language, even like Linklater and the Before movies and Slacker and stuff, which is not such a crazy visual language, but there's a feeling in those movies that is spoke to me. And so those, and Back to the Future 2, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit,
masterpiece.
But I loved, but I was watching everything. I was watching all these crazy Ken Loach movies. I tried to watch every movie in the video store in a row. That was what I thought I would do in high school. But I would say that those were the filmmakers that I was just trying to be someone that had a language. Yeah. That and Goodfellas was up there, in Casino, obviously.
Of course.
I mean, if you're this age, it's kind of the same movies.
Yeah.
There were like deeper cuts that I loved, obviously, but that's what made the ceiling.
Well, and it seems like
I loved Oliver Stone when I was 13.
Nice. It seems like through what Jeremy passed on that you guys had already just briefly discussed, that you're still kind of beefing up a lot of that film knowledge. So we'll dive into some more of the physical media stuff in a minute. But before we do, I got to ask, what is Silent Retreat, if you can share much on it?
Well, Silent Retreat's a heartbreaker for me. I don't know if that movie was gonna. I don't know how that movie gets released. I don't know how that happens. I don't know, man. What is that movie? After Isn't It Romantic, I had written something small and very strange with my best friend about 4 dummies who go on a silent meditation retreat, and it turns into a silent comedy. And I myself had been on many meditation retreats and thought it was a psychotic thing to do, a beautiful thing to do. I'm a meditator, and it's a big part of my life. But also, it's a very silly thing. Everyone's walking around like a zombie, slow, it's crazy. And I thought, gosh, that'd be so funny to do like a Charlie Chaplin movie at a silent retreat. What a clever idea. And so we wrote a script pretty fast, and I got a guy to give me money, like $5 million, to kind of go do whatever I wanted to do. And it was very hard to get famous people in the movie because it was so small. But we got a great cast, Isabella Rossellini, and we shot it, and no one bothered us, but also no one helped us. It was almost kind of like a fake movie. We were just sort of like off there doing it. All of my agents did not think this was a good idea for me to do this, but all of my artist friends were like, someone's going to give you a bag of money to make something. Well, sort of definitely do it.
Right.
I did it, and it was an experiment. It's a crazy tone. It is a drama, but it's also a slapstick comedy. And I thought that would just work. And maybe it does. I don't know. Anyways, COVID crashed into our world, and suddenly film festivals accepted no movies and and distribution, and I don't know what happened, but it is a movie without a home. And I don't know how to get it into the world, and I don't own it. And so it's uh not a great feeling, but it's definitely, I just think like when I'm 14 and I'm in the video store and I watch some movie that's like just so strange, like Earth Girls Are Easy, or like what else was so bizarre? I don't even know anymore. But you're just or like some John Waters early. We're like you're just like
Right.
I don't even know what this is, but there's value in this. This is just someone that went hard at something, and what a
Yeah.
weird thing. And that's kind of what we thought this would be, like an experimental comedy that was good natured and strange. And can we do that tone? Like, can that tone hold together? Like literally slipping on banana peels and also straight up like Buddhist Dharma. Can that work? And I don't know, but it's some weird, secret, shadowy movie that I hope one day finds a home.
I hope so too. I just looking through some of what I felt like what the influences were for some of these movies, especially Final Girls. I feel like the moment that I opened Silent Retreat on IMDb and I saw Isabella Rossellini attached, I went, man, that is a fucking win. That is a director that looks at this and goes, I got the person that I wanted in a movie, and this is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sincerely hope we get that out there for you.
It's a crazy one. You know that movie Crime Wave?
Yeah.
Like, I remember Crime Wave. I was like, well, this isn't very good, but God, this is so interesting. Like, or like Brain Donors. I used to
Yeah.
love Brain Donors. Like, what? This is the craziest thing. So that we tried to do that. One of these movies, I don't. Who knows? I don't know what. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like a not great situation for you, so I hope it somehow works itself out.
Yeah, thank you so much.
But funny enough, you just brought up one to transition good with. Brain Donors is getting a release on physical media on Blu-ray for the first time ever, literally in like 2 months from now.
With
And
special features?
I think there's a new audio commentary on it. I'll check while we're talking. Um, it is one that we've been waiting and talking about since it kind of got soft announced a while back, and it got delayed and delayed for the announcement for quite some time, but it is finally coming. And yeah, new audio commentary by the director.
Wait, really?
Yep, new audio commentary by Dennis Dugan, moderated by Lee Gambin, who is a film critic and film historian from Australia, and he's amazing.
Oh, holy shit! I'm gonna buy that the second that I get off of this. It's one of my
Yeah.
favorite movies.
Kino Lorber, yeah, they're doing amazing stuff out there, and it sounds like you yourself love some physical media. So tell me, what do you love about physical media?
I mean, I sort of mentioned it briefly, but it is a true story that I grew up in Queens. I grew up in an apartment building, and in the right next door to the apartment building was a video store, West Coast Video, and I truly, I think maybe I was how old? 12 or 13 or 14, something like that. I was I was like, my business is gonna be I'm gonna watch every movie in this fucking store. And I'm gonna start from left and go all the way right. And I don't care what the movies are. I don't care if I've seen them. I don't care if it's kids or fairy tales or sci-fi or any. I'm gonna watch every single one of them. I want to be an expert. And that was my plan, and that's what I did. And then every couple of months, they would like change how the store was set up, and it would fuck my whole shit up. So that I was like, "Could you please stop doing this? I'm here you need to do this." And
You can imagine a 15-year-old in there. I said stop.
yeah, I'm your number one guy. And sometimes I'd go to the store and I could sit on, like milk crates and watch movies there,
Yeah.
and they loved movies, and so it was just I loved it. But I also loved learning about movies from the filmmakers, commentary, obviously. I loved learning how movies were made. So the featurettes, where you could sort of see behind the scenes stuff, were just dazzling. I just
Yeah.
wanted to know everything. The camera's on a dolly. That was a crane. I just thought it was just so cool. And also, I still do it on Criterions. People thought that I was insane, but I found it. I'd always watch the features first and the movie second if I'd never seen it.
It's dangerous.
Well, I almost was like, I don't give a fuck about, like, Criterions especially. I'm like, it's not a good way to do it. But I always was like, I remember being in film school, and sometimes you would learn about the movie, its context, why it's important, its history, what came before, what came after, who this filmmaker was, how they got to this moment in
Yeah.
their thing. And then you'd watch the movie, and you'd watch it knowing what you were watching or why it was necessary. I remember the Red Shoes. I wanted to know all about Powell and Pressburger, and this is like at the tip top of their and it was so and that dream sequence has been ripped off 1,000 times, and so knowing that stuff and then watching the movie, you're I don't know, you're it's like watching a football game when you don't know who's playing, and then suddenly when you know all the backstory of every player, you're like, it's so much more engaging to watch. And so I always would do it like that. I wanted to do the features first and the movie second, so I could watch it with a more developed eye. And so that is why I love physical media, and particularly learned so much from commentaries and audio tracks. And probably everyone that listens to this knows, doing those commentaries, a lot of filmmakers were pretty shitty at those commentaries. Long periods of no talking, or doing just like color commentary, and you're like,
Yeah.
this
In this scene, watch what I do.
or you're like, oh, I remember she was so happy this day. You're like, I don't give a fuck. Like, give me information, teach me, educate
Right.
me, tell me how. What were you thinking? And obviously Paul Thomas Anderson and Oliver Stone. There are a number of people who maybe grew up on laser discs and just knew, or just were born and bred teachers, who would be incredible with these commentary tracks, and they would name check movies, and I ripped that off from this thing, and on this day that, and my prep was this, and you would really get a crash course in how it was made.
Yeah.
And then I would go and write down every movie that was mentioned, and then go watch those movies. And that would be the way that I built a web of knowledge. And I thought it was always such a gift when filmmakers did not play it cool, when they were very open with their influences and technique.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I thought maybe the first thing I would do is be a makeup effects artist. That I loved horror movies, and I thought, gosh, Tom Savini and Rick Baker, and I could do that. I'd love to do that. And that's what I did at home after school. My movies then were like latex and chopping my eyeball, and I was old, and then I had a pump, a blood pump in my wound, and I would buy liquid latex, and I wrote away to Dick Smith. You know who that?
Of course.
The God, and he was alive, and we had a correspondence. He was very easy to access, and he wrote back, and we for maybe a year, maybe there was 4 or 5 back and forths. I remember the funniest one was like, I ruined my mom's bathroom with liquid latex. Do you have any advice on how to fix that? And he wrote back, but I remember that in his responses, they were full of information. It was passing knowledge forward. And that's why there are so many, all of the next generation of makeup effects people love him and learned from him. And it wasn't about like siloing away your secret recipe, that it was about giving it freely. And that's your legacy. And I think about that. I try to do it. I learned everything from that.
I literally just got done editing a feature from somebody that learned under Dick Smith that did makeup in the late 90s. And just listening to the way that was passed down, it's so, I mean, first of all, it was inspiring, obviously, for a lot of these people, but it wasn't just puff words. They were actual, like, no, go do this and you will be able to do this. It was like instructions.
It was actionable stuff. I mean, that's, even going to Q&As. I mean, you see Q&As and stuff. Sometimes they just are not saying anything that's helpful.
Right.
Why are you acting like you don't want to be up there? Like, tell me things that are actionable, that are clear and specific, and just talk. I remember seeing William Friedkin, also Peter Bogdanovich was this way in these Q&As, and like I mean, they're obviously sociopaths, but there'd be like one audience question, and then they would talk for 90 minutes. And you'd be like, great, that's all I want to hear is just stories and insight and influence and how you did it. But on Harold and Kumar, the effects team was Nicotero and Berger, and I couldn't fucking believe that I got to hang out with Greg Nicotero.
Yeah.
And all I did is talk about Dick Smith. I told these stories. I asked him 1,000 questions about 1,000 movies and how'd you do this? And oh my God. And again, the generosity of sharing that knowledge. Yeah, it's just being a teacher. It's just the best. And anyways, that's why I love physical media, because it just felt so fucking generous when these
Yeah.
DVDs would be stacked full of stuff, because who's that really for? It's for people that want to learn how to do it or like just love it. And so it just felt like Halloween every fucking time you got one of these stacked up discs that would just teach.
I have enjoyed so many that are just film school in a box
What
so
are your
many
favorite
times.
ones? What are your
Oh
favorite
God, there's so many countless ones. Are you staying up to date on much other than Criterion? I know you love Criterion right now, but is there? So there's some import ones that are the visual essays that are coming out that are contextualizing the people behind these. So like there's a label out of Australia called Imprint Films, and they did like there was a film with Nastasia Kinski, who daughter of somebody that was deplorable by all accounts, and just explaining the adversities that this individual had to go through and why she would make this film at this time, and how you can almost see the pain on her face, and yet she pushed through that and gave this performance. It brought like so much more power to that performance.
It's an interview with her, or it's
it,
literally a
it's
written
a
essay
it's a film scholar just doing a spoken word essay about Nastasia Kinski, and it's just incredible to hear all of that. And that's one of those things that, like what you were saying, I'll watch the features and then I'll appreciate the film when I watch it. There are so many of these that the features, they're teaching you something about the film, and people a lot of times they just don't understand that. So like there was an Asian film called Detention from a few years ago that was based on a video game, but it was based on a real historical period of atrocity where people were literally murdered. Like it was a period of genocide, and because we're ignorant Americans, I knew nothing about it. So I watched the movie and I was like, well, this is neat. The effects were pretty cool. It was a decent story. And then I watched the features and I went, holy shit, hold on, what? And then went for a week and researched the hell out of this whole subject because the extras were so intriguing to me. And that alone, like, I was inspired to go study like my mid 30s. Like, what kind of a that's a gift that we're can be inspired like that.
I obviously agree. I'm just looking through my list of things that I've watched recently and just trying to think of what are good ones to talk about. I mean, there's the Repo Man box is stacked, filled with incredible stuff, also
Yep.
because of the era. But what's his oh my God, what's his fucking name? Harry Dean Stanton. There's some interviews with Harry Dean Stanton that are unbelievable. You know what I'm talking about? This
Oh
one?
yeah.
So fun. Where someone asks him a question, and he's like smoking cigarettes. He's so old. He's all made of leather, and he goes, "What the fuck are you asking me for? Like, I have an answer for that? Ask the universe." Like, he's so
Yeah.
abrasive. You're like, this is fascinating. There's an amazing. I just watched. They All Laughed. Do you know that Bogdanovich movie?
I
There's some.
have not seen it.
Yeah. Well, you can't stream it. I mean, that's obviously, you must talk about it all the time, physical media, because there's
Yep.
things you can't get into. You can't find half of these deep cuts. Man, They All Laughed is an unsung Bogdanovich. It's from the early 80s. John Ritter is in it.
Oh
And
wow.
and it's shot in New York. And the DVD has got a commentary by him and a a very hilarious featurette where young Wes Anderson, maybe 2 movies in, is interviewing Peter Bogdanovich in a coffee shop. And there's a lot of things that are nuts about it. One thing that's nuts about it, it's a half an hour long. One thing that's nuts about it is that whoever the crew was that was hired to shoot this interview clearly knew that they were in the presence of 2 geniuses. And so they're trying to be really fancy with how they shoot it. There's like moving overhead shots. And you're like, well, how many cameras did you guys have? Twice? Like how's this shot? There's like mirror. You're like, this is quite fancy.
Right.
Also, the movie's like pretty bad and like doesn't make any sense. And Wes Anderson goes, I have a real fondness for this movie, Peter, but it doesn't make any sense. And he goes, yeah, that's kind of the point. It's my favorite movie I've ever made. And you're like, this is your favorite movie you've ever made? He's like, I really felt that I hit a second chapter in my career. I really felt like that I had it. And then you watch that movie and you're like, this movie makes no fucking it doesn't make any sense. Even not like for the first hour, like until the end, you're like, what was any of this? But I thought that the featurette being an interviewer, one of them is like, this movie makes no sense.
My big Bogdanovich find recently, I just saw Targets for the first time. And that, I mean, Criterion just put that out, and discovering that in the period of hell that we've had over the last decade with mass shootings and all that was a wake-up call. I loved that movie.
I love that movie. I mean, I love that movie. I mean, I saw What's Up Doc projected like a year and a half ago after he did one of his last Q&As. Unbelievable. Still incredible. You ever see Local Hero? You know that movie?
I think so. It's been a long time. It's very fuzzy.
It's on the Criterion channel. I don't know. There is physical media. I watched it streaming, but I think that there's little bonusy things from the time. It is one of those movies. It's an amazing movie. It's a sweet movie. It's almost like Joe versus the Volcano in terms of like, it's a fairy tale, but it's not. But it's not. And it's like a billionaire that an old Burt Lancaster plays. It's like from the 80s. Sends a young guy to a town, I think an Irish fishing village, to get everyone in the town to agree to like sign a thing that lets them like build a factory in their port or something. But then he falls in love with the town. This sounds like a movie you've seen like 1,000 times. And yet, there's a magic to it. No one's that famous in it. No one that made it really went on to do anything else. The tone, the music, the town, the cast, the way the story is told, it is one of the most charming. There's magic in this movie to the point where Criterion sort of put it out. And that's one where it's not really a physical media story, but that's one where you're like, what is this little pocket of film history? And how did this happen? That a bunch of people that really didn't have like these, wildly successful careers, they struck gold. They made something they made a jewel. It's hard to make a jewel. They made a jewel.
Well, lots of these discoveries happen on physical media. So I got to ask, somebody that was a video store kid, how did that first time feel? Like how was your mind blown walking into a video store, being able to see a film that you directed sitting on that shelf?
Oh yeah, that was good.
I love the tone change there.
Do I remember what the first time was? Well, I think there were already no more video stores. But like walking into a Best Buy and seeing it there, that was good. Yeah, that was good. I was in a good one was I was in Taos, New Mexico, and Taos has a video store, like a fully functional, not like ironic, like just an actual video store that people come and rent videos at, DVD. And they have all the newest movies and all the newest TV shows. And I was like, I went in because there's just the thing of browsing for movies was the best. I did it with my family. I would do it in relationships, like in college and out of college, and just I remember having meltdowns and being like, "Can we just pick something?" Like that thing of like sitting in front of an Apple TV and like, what are we gonna watch? Was like actually at a store with like a lot of people. What are we gonna watch? But this was a video store in Taos, and I was like, "What? How are you in business? Like, how are you actually like here doing this?"
Right.
And they were like, "Well, the mountains make the Wi-Fi really bad here, so actually people can't stream; they have to watch DVDs." And I was like, "This rocks!" And I went all around the store, and it was so cool because all my movies were there
Wow.
and a bunch of friends' movies were there, and I was like, "This is so fucking rad!" Because that was sort of the feeling that you're talking about. Was like walking into a first run video store, and suddenly like your stuff is there, and then you know a lot of people whose stuff is there now in the first runs, and I was like, "God, what a crazy! It's great." Obviously, it's like bucket list kind of a feeling.
Yeah. You know, as you were kind of raised in that video store thing, so were a lot of other filmmakers, and not just in like finding films and discovering them, but like you just said, the finding the special features. That's kind of like the second generation of video store items where Criterion came in and made these popular. How do you think now that this is just a depressing thing to bring up, but you know, most of our modern filmmakers that are brand new, a lot of them don't own physical media at all, or you know, are discovering through streaming. How do you feel like that's going to affect some of these filmmakers?
I don't think it really matters. I feel like I think well, there's YouTube, so that you can get like so much more information so easily. So I don't know if like that part of it is lost.
Yeah,
Like the process by which you get the information is different as it is with like every other thing in modern life. Sure, when I was like formative in that age, it was like you'd hear about a movie and you'd go to the store and they didn't have it. You have to go to the city and try to go to a Tower Records or a Kim's Video and see if they had it. And if they didn't, they could order it. And so it was like a treasure hunt to get to this thing that was so important. And then you would devour it. So you don't really have that in the same way. But I think you still have access to that sort of information and probably a lot more of it. And Letterboxd is great. And there's so much more community. And you could also make things and have an audience for them. Like, not like TikTok and that shit, but like, I just can't imagine what it would be like to be in high school and be wanting to be a filmmaker and be making short films and not just be making them in my room for my parents, but to be making them and putting them up every day and then
yeah,
having real
real
time
time feedback.
interaction with people and maybe fans and and I think I would have loved it. So I like with everything with technology, it's a double-edged sword. Like the joy of the hunt
Right.
and the specialness of this treasure, probably not the same. But I still think that you can stumble on things you had never heard of and all these pockets of crazy film history and cult movies, and
Yep.
this leads to that. And I still think that you could do all those tributaries. You just get it easier. I don't know if that's the worst.
I'm fine with that part, and I agree with that. My big thing is what's the best way to say this? Like algorithm versus curation,
Yeah, yeah.
because a lot of what people like us have been shown were because somebody could say, me and my ancestors weeded out the terrible shit. Here is the things you need. And now you got TikTok. You got, you know, if you go on YouTube and you watch the wrong video, the next 38 that you're recommended are going to send you down some weird rabbit hole.
100%. And I think 100%. A video store was great because it was democratized, and it's very hard when you open up any of those platforms. You really got to know that you're hunting for something, and that it's just different. But
Yeah.
I, I'll make the other argument also is that like if you have a little bit of knowledge and you're like, well, I love, I mean, I don't know what filmmaker. I love Targets, and you go pull up Targets, and it's like other movies like this, or like
Yeah.
there's the Filmmaker, and you can immediately dive into that, and like it's just a different way. But I will say, I'm in New York now, and one of the greatest things about being here is these like the film forum, like these theaters that program those corners that you maybe don't know about. They're not just like LA is so dumb. Not everywhere. They're American Cinematheque
No, it is for the most part.
and Egyptian, like places do great curating, but most of these places are just like Alien. You're like, I need to see Alien. Like it's cool, big screen Alien.
Right.
Here it's like, what did I just see? Victims of Sin. You're like, what the fuck is Victims of Sin? It's like the heyday of Mexican cinema was in the 50s. All these crazy black and white film noirs, gorgeous. This one's a musical. The music is Cuban. Never heard of it. Wouldn't even ever know to look for it. And they're programming it. And you go, oh, let's give it a shot. Let's give it a shot. And you go in and you watch it. At home, if you somehow stumble on or are told of some movie and you go, let's give it a shot, at least for me, and I must not be the only one, those movies are not moving at a clip. They're old movies, they're long movies, they're slow movies. It's just a different wavelength. It's just challenging at home because you dominate the event.
Oh, yeah.
You have a remote, you have a phone, you're distracted, you can stop it, you can get up, you can talk. It's different. And when you try to experience, slow cinema, older movies, strange movies in a theater, it's a much better experience because at least I am paying attention. I'm really can see what I'm looking at. Killers of the Flower Moon is a new one, long in a theater, amazing. At home, I did the impossible. I just watched Farewell My Concubine 35 up on the big screen. That's a violent, fucked up, weird melodrama, gorgeous to look at. In a theater, it is mesmerizing. It just carries you away. At home, it just wouldn't be the same. So even more than physical media, I feel like being like one of those like archaeologists, or whatever, like just having that thing in you that like is a collector, like that collector's feeling of like, I want to know all of these corners of the history of all these weirdos that made these things. And I want to be an autodidact about, and I want to remix these ideas and try to steal things from deep cuts. And it's such a more fun way to do it in a theater, I think, even more than being at home on a DVD sometimes.
Fully agreed. I just fear for the people that are in Mississippi or Omaha, Nebraska, or something that don't have these opportunities. And it
well, you're in Kansas. So what is it? So tell me, people that listen, people in your community, people that are young that want to do it, do you feel like that they can't find the information, or that they do and it's so much more transitory?
I think the people that want to see it they know the ways to find it. The hard part is gaining new fans. You're a victim of, shitty Facebook marketing, or, it's a small theater, so they can't pay to market things appropriately. So you're not hearing about rep screenings. Hell, a label that I'm friends with just sent me an email say, "Hey, you're in Kansas City. I don't know if you know about this." And they told me about a label playing a theater playing one of their films tonight. I had no idea. They don't get to advertise like that. So something like that, unless you're seeking it out, it's damn near impossible. And a lot of those times, the ones that are showing it are remote in a way that's intimidating. So if I want to go to a nice rep screening where it's shown appropriately with a nice environment and not some shitty AMC that's falling apart, I'm 45 minutes to somewhere decent, which it's not bad, but then you put in, I have a full-time job and 2 young kids and blah, blah, blah. And suddenly it's a 5-hour trip and a babysitter. It's making more money than me.
But is there anything about, if you're on Letterboxd or you're just like in a community or you're in the know or you got some friends that like love movies and word spreads, it's always been a word spreads kind of a world, like Blood Simple was a word spreads kind of movie, even back in the like South Park, like all those things were like little viruses even then. So if you're in the know and you hear about something, you can just kind of quickly get it on a streaming service, or just, you're not supposed to, but you can just fucking torrent it, and you can get it, right?
That's why I do what I do. I spread the word about as much as I possibly can. That's the big thing.
It's one of the great things. It's one of the great things about being a filmmaker is that when you get to hang out with other filmmakers, sometimes if you're lucky, unless you're talking about box office, all this bullshit, but if you find some people that really love movies and want to talk
Yeah.
movies, like how people talk sports, it's like if you want to just talk movies, and I love doing that. I don't know jack shit about sports. Did you see me trying to like sort of like tread water talking about football a second ago?
Oh, I live in Kansas City, the home of the frickin' Chiefs and the Royals. I can't stand sports. So
Yeah, the
everybody here is
football
just
players.
right. They're on fire for them. And I'm like, I don't fucking care.
But if you want to talk movies, like everyone is sort of like trying to almost like be like, have you seen this? Have you seen that?
Yep.
And you just sort of someone just Liquid Sky. What's Liquid Sky? What's Liquid Sky? It's some crazy sci-fi art movie from the 80s shot in Greenwich Village. What the fuck is Liquid Sky? Can't get it anywhere, can't even buy it. Gotta rip it. Crazy movie. Chud. I just watched Chud.
Speaking of New York movies.
I know. It's like people are always like After Hours. What an incredible New York movie. Chud.
Yeah.
But
Love it.
But, I don't know.
For the record, Liquid Sky available on Blu-ray from Vinegar Syndrome. Everybody should go check it out if you have
You
not.
get Liquid Sky on Blu-ray? Why didn't I
Yes,
just
sir.
I've got to buy it.
I've got it on the shelf across the way from me.
You have Liquid Sky?
Yeah, yes, sir.
You've seen Liquid Sky?
Of course, yeah. Liquid Sky's amazing.
So what's your background, man? So what? You're like also you were a kid and you just were so enamored with movies that you watched every movie in the video store, or what?
Funny enough, it's kind of the opposite. I was in a tiny town. Do you know California super well? I know that you spent some time in LA, but
Sure.
if you've ever driven to Vegas from LA, I grew up in Barstow.
Oh yeah, I know where that is.
I'm sorry. So I grew up in Barstow. There was nothing there. We had a Blockbuster and then a little mom and pop place, but because it's so small, they only made money on the mainstream film. So I only heard of like the Jurassic Parks and the shit like that. So all of that was normal in my house, but it took me branching out into finding friends in the music scene. I used to host shows. I had bands stay at my house. We'd be hanging out and they'd be like, man, we're talking about a song they're working on. They'd be like, this is the inspiration from it. They talk about some films. And I'm like, I've never even heard of, like Evil Dead 2. They'd be like, what do you think of Evil Dead 2? I'm like, what's Evil Dead? And I'd have to go and watch it. And so because I was so enamored with the music industry, I'm Best Buy and Circuit City on Tuesdays to pick up new CDs. Hey, they also have movies here. I started picking those up. And it's been a well of learning since then and discovering everything that I wasn't able to learn about when I was younger.
Do you know what is driving your passion?
Trying to learn about other cultures, I think. I was very sheltered as a young white male Christian from two parents that were not good people. And I've not been poor my entire life, but not well off. And without the ability, I work for immigration in my full-time job, and I've never been out of the country. And the only way I can travel is through cinema. I've experienced so many other cultures because I've forced myself to learn about other places. It's traveling the world for $20 on some incredible film. Scorsese, putting a box set together for a Criterion that goes cross world cinema. I can't beat that $50 price tag instead of going to 7 different countries.
I mean, that is a really beautiful thing to hear you say. I mean, yeah, that is kind of the point of the whole form, right? Yeah. Empathy machines and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know how to beat that. That's like the most beautiful thing you could possibly say about movies.
I appreciate that. It's what I, strive for. And I really go off of the mantra for this channel that every single movie has been someone's favorite movie. And if I'm going to live by that, I try to find appreciation in every single thing that I see.
I do too. I hate when people talk shit on movies. You hear it all the time. It's so hard to make a movie. You kind of always want to be supportive. It's amazing anything good ever gets made. But like, I'll sit at home and like try to watch the trailers for like all the real bad ones. Like new release. Like what is this? This looks those like super cheapy sci-fi, and you're like, just good for these guys. Like whoever did spend the effort to do it, and like good for them.
Exactly.
It's exciting to watch. It's just exciting. It just takes so much energy to make something that you want to go. Maybe there's like one great shot or two good lines or a good
Yeah,
performance or that idea was good. It wasn't fully baked, but they were headed somewhere, and that's exciting. I don't know.
exactly.
I like watching the bad ones too. There's something
There's a lot
beautiful.
to learn from them.
Yeah, it's beautiful. During COVID, I tried to program little film festivals for my girlfriend and I.
Nice.
But exactly like that. I was like, we're going to Ireland this week. And I just the commitments and my left foot and like the boxer and like all I'm just like trying to get into that. And then I'd be like,
Nice.
now we're doing Vim Vendors week. And then we'd go, oh man, Alice in the City is just paper moon. Holy shit, we didn't know that. And you pair those together. But like it was just so exciting to sort of like to do exactly that, to travel through movies. We did a big week on Leo Carax, you know,
Yeah.
like Mauvais Sang and Lovers on the Bridge. Lovers on the Bridge, which again very hard, unstreamable. How to get the box set. That's one of the best movies I think I've ever. That guy and that movie, that took our breath away because it was travel, but it was also. It was like composition and filmmaking that, you know, it was that feeling of being 14 and being like, who the fuck is that?
Yes.
Who did that? You kind of feel like you know a lot eventually, and it's hard to be surprised.
Yep.
And every now and again, you'll find some old thing or there's some new thing, and you're like, holy shit.
Somebody says in a video you should watch Liquid Sky, and you go watch it. You go, damn, this is incredible.
Hey, you're like, what the fuck is that? You probably won't feel that way about Chud, but if you paired Chud and After Hours, you'll be like, well, that's the same street in the same year. And, well, that's just a 360 of New York in the 80s.
Todd, you have been incredibly generous with your time. I could probably talk to you about movies for the next 9 hours if we had the ability
it's
to.
so fun, isn't it? I love talking about movies.
Well, maybe we can do it again sometime. Thanks for hanging out tonight.
I'd love to.
Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.
I am Adam Lundy, co-host of They Live by Film, a podcast dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. Every week, my co-hosts Chris Haskell, Zach Bryant and I discuss a wide range of films, from monumental classics like Vertigo and The Rules of the Game, to the craziest, schlockiest movies ever made like Deathbed and everything in between. We are also lucky enough to have sat down with some of the biggest players in the boutique Blu-ray and film restoration game. If this is your thing, then come hang out with us every Thursday at 7 PM Eastern, wherever you normally stream your podcasts, and now as part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.